power's on.
Oh, that's the power?
That's the
I think
power.
it might have just gone to sleep.
You're not recording.
I should be in camera. Recording, I think, is...
You are recording.
On
We're
record.
on record.
Okay, I'm Reid Silvern, Reid Gordon Silvern, and I was born in Olean, New York, 1410 State Street. And this is my mother, Bea Claire Silvern. Shall I give her maiden name, or...
Yeah.
Why
Right.
not?
Hilda, what's your middle name?
Barish. B-A-R-I-S-H.
But what was your middle name?
Claire.
Oh, Hilda Claire Barish. Born in Brooklyn. Do you remember where?
Born in Manhattan.
Oh, Manhattan.
Yes, at the
That's news to
Jewish
me.
Hospital
All right.
in 1926, March 9th, 1926.
Right. And what we're going to do is we're going to give a little background and ask Mom about her mother.
Excuse me.
Rose
What is
Barish.
you are her son?
I am her son, the second son, born 1952, April 13th, 1952. And the oldest son is Stephen Jack Silvern. And he was born January 2nd, 1946. And he is the first baby boomer. Absolutely first. Probably the second baby boomer because he was born January 2nd. Okay.
But at 2 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. Just barely missed the
Right.
cutoff.
New Year's.
Yeah. So let's talk about your mother, Rose, and your father, who is Irving.
Barish.
Yeah. And first tell the story about where the name Barish came from.
That originally was my dad's, from my dad's family. His name was Barish Polsky. Irving Barish Polsky. Because the Barishes had come from Poland, and Polsky refers to Polish. They migrated from small towns when the pogroms were happening in Europe. They migrated to Kiev. And that's where that part of the family lived for a long time. And then my dad came to Vienna, which is where he met the Freud family. Another question?
Okay, so he's a Barish Polsky. Let's talk about his two brothers and what their names are.
Yes. Herschel, no, that was my mother's brother. You know, I don't remember. I'll think about this. He had two brothers, names of whom I can't remember. And when they came to the United States, through diverse trips everywhere, from Italy, from London, however they could get out of Europe, when they came to the United States, the people at Ellis Island they did not come together. The oldest brother, Irving, another Irving, and what was the other one? Herschel, Irving, William.
Yeah, okay.
When they came, the first one came, brought the next one over, and then they brought the third one over, and that's how that family came to New York City. Now, what they did when they came to Ellis Island, they chopped up people's names. They said, Barish, Polsky, it's two names. You're Mr. Barish, goodbye. The next brother became Mr. Polsky, and the third brother became Mr. Barsky. So at my wedding to my husband David, I had to introduce the blood brothers, Mr. Barish, Mr. Barsky, and Mr. Polsky.
But the story is the person at the window or you know the table in Ellis Island said nobody in the world can remember in America can remember a name like Barish Polsky. Too many syllables. So you are Mr. Barish. The second guy had the same thing about too many syllables, and he became Mr. Polsky. And then the third brother is Mr. Barsky. As a result, it makes it very, very hard for us to track that quarter of the family, and we have kind of lost track with the Barskys and the Polskys.
There must be some still in New York City, somewhere along the line, and we have lost track.
Okay. Now, how did and this is what, 1920s, 1910s? It's pretty recent.
That they came here?
Yeah.
It was early 20s.
Yeah, they're not
I was born in 26.
Yeah, they're not like 1890s or anything.
And that was an arranged marriage. The oldest brother, there's a history about that particular family in Europe where they used to make arranged marriages. And the oldest brother had to give his approval and usually made the arrangement, found a wife for the next brother. And what they did just for fun is they had the next brother find a wife for the next brother. So that he would have some seniority. And that's how that came about. And my mother was actually an arranged marriage with her older brother, arranged to have her go to America to marry Irving, my father.
And what year was that?
Let's see, 1923, I believe.
So you can see that, you know, we're some of the last, so I believe they changed the law in 1924. And also, because it's the 20s, that really was Ellis Island.
Right.
Yeah. So tell her about your father and what happened to him.
The reason he came here is because he was conscripted to become a soldier in the Russian army. And they put him on a train and took them away. And on the train, a number of the Jews, they used to give the Jews the menial jobs. So the men were not only unhappy about being constricted and put into the service, but they knew that they were going to be the slaves, essentially, of all the other folks. No chance for officer category, nothing. So they escaped when they just literally escaped off the train in the dead of night and made their way through Italy to the United States. How they got to the United States, I never knew.
Now, this is your dad's family?
That's my dad.
Oh, I never heard this.
Where they were originally from Kiev.
Yeah.
His family.
Okay, and what happened to your dad when you were 2?
I don't remember. What are we talking
We're
about?
talking about his head injury.
When I was 2, he was already married. I was a child of 2 years old. And he was doing very, very well. He and one of his brothers, his older brother, had started an upholstery shop. My dad was the inside man. He had muscles, unbelievable muscles from the upholstery.
Where was that?
And they started an upholstery business, and he also delivered the furniture. They had a little truck. And there was an automobile accident, and a shard of glass from the windshield. He was thrust forward, a shard of glass lodged in his skull, and it lodged in the memory portion that we now know as the memory portion of his brain. He was hospitalized, of course, but he was able to learn to feed himself and to speak, but the memory was very peculiar. He would go to sleep and wake up not remembering the day before or anything before the sleep. So everything every day was new to this man. I can't imagine what kind of a life that was. He was hospitalized permanently because of the fact that he would wake up and not know where he was or who he was. And so he was put into, was it Montefiore? No. He was put into a mental institution, although he wasn't mentally ill in any respect except that memory. But he was institutionalized for years. My mother, I was 2 years old when he was taken to the institution. And my mother used to take me to visit, quote, an uncle, every month, visiting day. She had no hope of his ever coming out. So she never told me that I had a father. I thought my father was dead. And she claimed later I never said that word. And I recall now as a grown-up, she never did say he was dead. But I and the neighborhood and people assumed he was dead. If he wasn't there, he was dead. So, and that was the story as far as Irving was concerned. But when I was 2 years old, a doctor from England came to the United States who had developed a new operation on the brain. And he was in the what do they call those theaters where the doctors all look through that glass up on levels?
An operating theater.
An operating theater. But he was doing sample operations and lecturing about his discovery. And they used my father's example and him essentially as a guinea pig.
Yeah. And how old were you at that time?
2 years old.
You were 2 when he got the operation?
Yes.
Oh.
Wait a minute.
You must have been
No,
12.
no, when he was hospitalized, I was 2 years
Yeah.
old. I was 11
11.
when he had that operation.
Okay.
And suddenly, of course, living with my mom, who was working from 6:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night in a sweatshop. That was her life. That's another story with her. She was a brilliant woman.
You have to tell that story.
She became a union representative. Well, that's another story. But at any rate, I'll continue with what I remember of my dad's life momentarily. He suddenly, at 11, my mother had brought in to this country her mother, Gittel Freud, her youngest brother who escaped from a concentration camp, Jakob, Jack, and she brought them over with the help of her older brother and the next brother, Herschel and Irving, 2 Irvings. That's why I get them a little mixed up. And they all came here when the Nazis, when Hitler started persecuting the Jews. My Uncle Max got them out of Europe.
That was 1940.
Right.
Yeah, and that's after the Anschluss.
That's right.
About a year and a half after the Anschluss. We're going to go into that in some detail about your families being brought over. And but before we do, let's talk a little bit about Rose and her union activity.
Oh, my mother worked in the sweatshop. She was the kind of person who did things for everybody, whatever it took. And she became very, very well liked. And when the unions became a little stronger in those sweatshops, they asked my mother to represent that factory as a union rep. That's how she got involved with the union and became quite an established macher, to use the word that I remember my father used to kid her about, my macher wife. She became a representative in the union. And matter of fact, that's how she got Max involved later on.
Didn't she get beat up in demonstrations?
Oh yeah,
and stuff?
they used to have strikes, and she was the leader of the strikes.
Yeah.
And she gave as much as she got. If she got beat, she hit back. Incredible. Tiny little woman, 4 feet 11.
Wow.
And a little heavy, she was a strong lady, both emotionally and physically. Had to be to get through those times, I suppose.
We're talking deep depression
That's
before.
Right. That's right. So, where did you want me to talk about the union?
Well, I just wanted to get, and I just want to make it clear to anybody watching, it's the International Ladies Garment Workers Union.
Also,
in
there
New
was a
York.
branch in the Men's Garment Workers Union as well, that she was then ended up representing. Did you know about that?
No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
That was a little later on.
I knew that Uncle Max was ILGWU.
Right.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the arrival. First of all, what Uncle Max and Aunt Schiffer did in Europe and how they got Jews out and how they got themselves out. So,
well, when the Nazis took over, my Uncle Max Schwartz, Moses Schwartz, essentially. I think all the Nazis named all the Jewish men Moses automatically.
Moishe.
Oh, yeah, M-O-I-S-A, E-S. M-O-I-S-E-S. I don't even know how to pronounce that. When they came to Ellis Island, they changed it. What's this name? Max. They wrote down Max, and he became Max. But at any rate, at that time, he had a paper and stationery business where they sold letters and envelopes and papers and pens and all of that kind of paraphernalia.
Where?
we actually have an address in his papers.
Okay. Where, for record though, where was that?
In Vienna.
In Vienna.
They had emigrated to Vienna from Hungary, Polish Hungary. There was an area that's no longer
I think it's
that name.
Galicia. It's
Galicia.
Trembovla.
Yeah, Trembovla.
Yeah.
Was the town. And they migrated. The reason they came there, because it was a Freud connection.
Yeah.
My aunt, name was Sophie, but it pronounced the Polish way, Schifra, S-I-F-R-A, Schifra.
Actually, it's SZYFRA.
That's right. I
We
forgot about
we
this.
have her papers too. Yeah, how that's pronounced.
And
is
with the
the question.
Nazi stamp, we have those papers. Actually, those should be on
They're
insert.
right there. Yeah.
Yeah, they should be on inserts,
Yeah.
because it's fascinating. It gives you the chills when you see that Nazi stamp. Ugh. You don't realize how fortunate we are now. Oh, well, that's another story.
Yeah.
But at any rate, there they were, in Vienna now, and Max had started a business from scratch, peddling, and then getting a little shop, and developing a very nice, lucrative, not wealthy, but a nice living in this little stationery business. The Nazis took over. One of the Nazi officers was assigned his business. It was given to Helmut. Never knew his last name. Helmut, a Nazi officer, would come every week and collect the profits. And Max had to work that business for him. Which was, I suppose, happened to so many people.
Yeah.
But at any rate, there he was with his business. Now, at night, Sophie, Schiffer, my aunt, his wife, Max and Schiffer used to work till 3:30, 4 o'clock every morning, making up paperwork, falsifying passport paperwork, because he had little printing machines that were as part of this business. And the way he got to do that was one of Helmut, the Nazi officer. Do you remember how that happened?
Yeah. The Nazi officer put him in a second job
Right.
at a transportation office. We don't know quite what. Some kind of railroad office.
Railroad transportation.
And what it would do is it arranged for deliveries of livestock.
Cattle.
Yeah, cattle, sheep, so on and so forth. I remember sheep being mentioned, but I'm not sure about the cattle.
Yes, no, I didn't remember
Yeah,
that.
then it was definitely cattle. And what he would do is he would set up paperwork for Jews, and he would put them in to the trains
The
as
cattle
the
cars.
shepherds who watched the cattle and made sure that they were okay when they got there. And they were shipped off first to Italy, and then apparently to England, and then to America. The route and what group that was, I don't know.
You said you had seen one of the papers that mentioned that.
Well,
Maybe you
doesn't
can use it on
no,
an
your
insert.
your play is the only place I really
I
know
see.
about that. Tell the story about how they escaped the Nazis when the Nazis came for him.
The Nazis were using Max to do all kinds of machinations, changing apartment owners' names on apartments to their names. They were forcing them to do that and print up false information so that they could steal everything from the Jewish people who owned anything. Now, Max and Schiffer used to be at work at night. They used to make false passports and sleep 2 or 3 hours a night only, make passports, and then hire Jews to work with the cattle and the sheep pick up the dew, clean, keep the cattle cars clean. But they would also smuggle groups of people at the last moment as the trains were starting to go. The guys inside who were taking care of the animals would open the doors, and the Jews who had been in hiding would run into those cars and travel among all those animals. There was no facilities. I mean, can you imagine living for days and days across country with no facility for personal hygiene? And that's the way my Uncle Max was able to get hundreds of Jews out of the Hitler years.
Yeah, in Vienna.
In Vienna,
Viennese
through
Jews.
Vienna. Yeah. It gives me the goosebumps
Yeah,
to
and
this
there
day.
is what they call a Trembovla Burial Society, which a lot of the Jews who work for the ILGWU belong to. And I've actually seen people go up to him and just almost fall on their knees.
They would kiss his hand.
Yeah, literally. And say, "You saved me, you're wonderful, anything I
I
can do for
wouldn't be
you."
in this country, I wouldn't have a
Yeah.
family, I wouldn't be alive.
And
Nobody
neither
I
would
know.
my children.
That's right.
Yeah, so, however, documentation, do we know anything about this particular, obviously these networks are very secret, and I haven't found, I've checked the internet, there's nothing.
Oh, on the internet, how would it get there?
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, that is his story. I have heard him tell it, and as probably a college kid, and of course,
Now,
Mom
how did
knows
he
it.
get to the United States?
Well, before that,
Oh, okay.
tell the story about when they actually rounded up the Jews in his building.
They finally rounded up, they took away my aunt's younger sister and her whole family, her sister Clara. They were invading building by building and throwing the Jews out and putting them on the cattle cars. And they reached that building, took away that family, and my aunt was on the upper level, next level up. These buildings were 3 and 4 stories, as I recall. And she heard what was going on. She ran, she put through Max, she said, Max, you get into bed, right now. What, go in bed, don't argue with me, go in bed. He would get in bed, she would open up his collar, she would cover him up, and then she took her lipstick and started making little dots of red all over his face and forehead, and covered him up to his neck. And by then they were banging at the door. And so she said, yes, I'm coming in a minute, I'm in the bathroom, I'll be right there, making these little dots. She opened up the door, and Helmut, this man that she talked about, the Nazi said, what are you doing? Where were you? Where's your husband? She said, well, my husband's sick, you can come, please come and talk to him. He walked over to the bed and saw this man, and he said, get away from me, woman, get away from me. Did you touch me? And he ran out. He said, I'm going to quarantine this room, your apartment, and left the building, and that's how they escaped. Everybody in the building was rounded up.
Yeah, the minute the Nazis left, they left and never came back.
And then they made papers for themselves, finally.
Well, apparently they had those for quite a while. They stayed longer than they needed to. This is a story that I heard.
That's true.
And who else did Uncle Max in our family get out?
I don't remember now.
Your grandmother?
Oh, yeah, Gittelfreud, the younger brother who escaped from the concentration camp, Jakob.
Which concentration camp was he in? Do you know?
I think it was Belsen.
Oh.
Where was Belsen? Do you remember
It's in
physically?
Germany somewhere.
Yeah, it was in Germany. It was not Dachau. It was Belsen.
Okay.
And he was a big bruiser. You know, he was 6'2", and solidly built. So he was very strong physically, and he organized. Well, twice they caught him. This was the third escape when he finally made it. But they tried. The Jews were, at that point, they were not going to go quietly, because the stories had gotten out that they were gone and put into the gas chambers. They were going to, if necessary, just with their bare hands fight and die that way. So that little by little, 1 or 2 would get it. They would keep cutting the fences in different places, and 1 or 2 would escape to the surrounding areas, and then get to Max and Schiffer. Max, they would have papers now, and get on the trains and get out. And that's how they came to America.
Oh,
The
I
land.
think this just went out.
Okay, hang on. Let's hold just a second. Hold that thought. I'm going to hit the record button. I know it is.
Well, you also have to
Okay,
say.
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we just talked about Uncle Max and the smallpox incident, and I believe she asked him to take him to the hospital, if I remember my
Yes,
memory
she
of
said,
it.
please
She
get a
asked the
stretcher
Nazis
and
to
take
take him to the hospital,
Don't,
and
I'm
they
not
ran
touching
out.
him. I'm not touching him.
Yeah,
Get away from me, woman.
and apparently smallpox was still rampant back in that day. So there you are.
Forever to be called lipstick pox.
Yeah, and then one more little detail is they apparently went from Vienna by train to Italy, and then from Italy they were smuggled into England, I believe, and then from England they were brought to America, but our family was brought to America because of a righteous Gentile who deserves to be named, and that's Mr. Criminy,
Oh,
who owned a textile sweatshop.
in
and
New
who
York.
sponsored. You had to establish employment to people from overseas before they would let them into the country. That's how tough they made it on the Jews. Otherwise, a lot more Jews would have gone out. And her mother established Mr. Criminy to sign papers that he was going to give each one of this family of Jews a job in New York, and did.
And he also signed up that he would find them housing, so that they would not allow anybody into this country then that would be a burden on the United States. It had to be independently filmed. It was very hard. It's so different now, the comparison where people just walk across the border and they're here.
Yeah. But, we won't get into that, rap. But the point is that they did make it very, very hard on the Jews. So I don't know what Mr. Criminy's first name was. Do you have a memory?
No. Well, he was always, this was a man that owned a
He was
sweatshop.
Italian.
He was Mr. Criminy. You did not know his first name.
Yeah.
But his daughter Mary, I remember, and there's the other one with Ruthie and Mary.
Yeah.
We lived in an apartment building, and we were there were 2 apartments on each floor in Brooklyn. And they were on one floor, they had the view, we looked in the backyard. And they had the good apartment. And that's how we became friendly with the Criminys. And he then guaranteed all of that family employment and a place to stay. There was another level on the 3rd floor, which was very hot and hard to rent anyway. And so he would put them up there until they could find their way into getting their own place. So sometimes 2 and 3 families were living in each apartment up above us.
And he was Italian,
Italian.
and he saved, again, partially responsible. Uncle Max got him out, but if it wasn't for Mr. Criminy and his family...
That's right, they would have no
they
paperwork.
Yeah, they would have had no paperwork.
They would be turned back.
Yeah.
Many ships were turned away.
And they would have at least ended up in England, but it's hard to say what their fate would have been there. Because the British weren't too thrilled about having Jewish refugees either.
It was too close to Hitler for
Yeah.
them.
Okay, now we have another story to tell, and this story is about Grandmother Giddle. Grandmother Giddle could read dreams. Please tell me about her.
She used to, when she could predict the future, the close future, in her dreams, and truly believed that this would happen. There was always a running battle. When my mother brought Giddle and Jack and had a family now, we had a 2-bedroom apartment. Giddle had a room of her own, and my mother and Irving had their room, and I slept on a cot that we opened up every night in the hall. And Jack slept on the couch. And that's the way we lived in Brooklyn. Now, when there was a running battle with my mother, whose name is Rose, and my grandmother would come in for breakfast. And my mother would take a look at her and say, she had another dream again. Another dream. All right, what is it? Well, I want to go see Jack. We were just there this last week. We're only supposed to go once a month for visiting hours. I have to see Jack. I can't take you to see Jack unless it's visiting hours. We have to see Jack before it's no longer able to see him.
Yeah.
Well, that scared my mother. And she said, you won't let me have any peace. I'll see what I can do. And she started trying to find a way. She did manage to get my grandmother to visit Jack.
Jack contracted tuberculosis in the camps.
In the camps.
And then came to America and worked in a laundry of all places. Very humid laundry, and was going outside in the cold.
He used to load the laundry onto trucks, so he'd go in and out of the steamy laundry in the middle of winter and go out into the freezing New York weather and got sick.
Yeah, this aggravated his tuberculosis, and he landed in a tuberculosis hospital
That was was that
somewhere.
Montefiore Hospital?
I guess so, somewhere in New York. And that's just a little context to why she has to visit Jack.
She wanted to visit Jack, so my mother knew there would be an impossible battle. She wouldn't give her any peace. Okay, I'll take you to see Jack, and then that'll be that. So she called up and said that somebody was sick, and she did and brought my grandmother to see Jack. My grandmother kept saying, I have to say goodbye to Jack. And of course, my mother had a fit. She doesn't like talk like that. She was terrified of my grandmother's dreams. You had a dream, I don't want to hear it. But she took her. My grandmother spent about a half hour with him, and then my mother brought her back to Brooklyn. This was way at the other end of Bronx, if you know New York at all. And the next day, they got a call for an emergency at the hospital that Jack was very, very, very ill.
This is the day after they
The day
visited.
after they visited him. And so they ran to the hospital, and I think he was dead in 2 days. Gone.
The nurse left the window open,
In his room.
and he got pneumonia
His lungs were
in
bad.
his last lung.
He had one lung by then. And she never did get to see him. But
No,
before,
she did. I thought she did visit.
oh yeah, well, yes, but I mean after
Yeah.
that. But when my mother said, all right, you want to see Jack, you had another dream? I don't want to hear it. Tell me what the dream was.
Yeah.
That was the rap. I don't want to hear it. What? What
What?
was it?
Yeah.
She said, well, I dreamt that we were in a theater, and we were sitting down below. It was a very steep theater. The seats went up and up, and we were sitting down below, and I heard Jack calling me from up there. Mama, hello, I'll come, hello. And I looked, I said, oh, we'll come up and sit with you. And Jack said, no, you can't come to where I'm sitting. And that's how she knew that Jack.
And yeah, but there was another sentence that Jack said. This was after Jack died. When was she going to be able to see Jack?
Oh, yes.
This is actually the second.
And she had another dream, yeah. And she said, then she came home and she had another dream, the second dream. And my mother, at breakfast, the same rap. Oh, I see on your face you had another dream. I don't want to hear it. What was it? She said, well, I dreamt that we were in a theater. Jack was sitting up there, and I said I would come and see him. And he said, Mama, you cannot come where I am, but after Mother's Day,
Or this Shabbat.
after Mother's Day, on that Shabbat,
Oh, okay.
you will come to where I am. You can come to me.
That's a detail I didn't know.
Yes. And we were sitting in the living room. I remember when this happened. It was a couch here. I was in the corner. My grandmother was here. The following Shabbos. We had had a chicken dinner, of course. And my mother Rose was at this end of the room, and Irving was in the armchair. And all of a sudden, my grandmother said, Rose, you have to make sure to do the laundry, do the extra laundry, because I piled it up and I put it in the other closet, because Irving was sleeping, so I couldn't put it in your closet. So get the laundry from the other, what do you mean? I never do the laundry. You do the laundry. No, I won't be able to do the laundry anymore. You do the laundry. And then don't forget to pick up the chicken that we ordered from the butcher. And she put her head back and snored. I was sitting there and I thought she was snoring. I thought she went to sleep. She put her head back and I heard,
And this is just as
And
the
she was
sun
gone.
was going down, and
On
they were
Shabbat.
about to light the candle.
Shabbat, she was gone. That was the end of Gittel Freud. Yeah.
It was Gittelfreud. Aunt Schiffer was born Schiffer Freud, and Rose was Freud too, right?
Yes, Rose
Yeah.
Freud. Now, one Jack had the name Forster, Foerster. That was my grandmother's maiden name. Her married name was Freud, because the men were obviously. So she was Gittel Forster Freud, but why he was only Gittel Jacob Forster on the paperwork that I have, I was never able to find out.
He's probably the brother on the father's side, or the mother's side.
Well, that was her the maiden name, Gittel's maiden name, Forster, F-O-E-R-S-T.
And there's still a bunch of Forsters in Israel, and
That's right.
I've visited some of them. So it's Forsters, Muellers, and some other last name from all over Romania, Austria, England,
But not South America.
Israel. No, every place practically but South America.
Mm-hmm.
So now, was there also a third incident? I thought there were 3 tragedies in the first dream, 2 deaths and a sickness.
Oh, that had to do with Herschel. Yeah, yes. When the marriages were arranged, the women were recommended to and be sent to the United States. Now, my grandmother balked, B-A-L-K-E-D, at that arrangement only once, where she said, "No, this is not going to be a good marriage. This will be a bad thing." Why? I don't want to talk about it. And my mother, of course, I don't want to talk about it. What? Same scenario. And she said, Herschel, I see that Herschel is going to be married to a woman with a hickle. And now a hickle meant a limp. It was a word like hickle, a limp. I see him with a woman who drags her leg. And I don't think that they should make that arrangement for him, for that wife. You have to stop it. Well, they couldn't stop it. And eventually he married this woman. And she fell down the stairs, and one leg ended up shorter than the other. And she was limp the rest of their lives together. My grandmother used to have these weird dreams, some of which we never heard the dream itself. We just heard what she told my mother, what I would have overheard her tell my mother. So some of the dreams itself, like the one with the theater, I never heard. But what was the one with Irving? Oh yes, and the other that would be a tragedy. Her 2 oldest boys, Herschel and Irving. The other tragedy would be that he would marry a guy. And she said, he can't get, do not send Irving away from that city. They didn't send him away, and sure enough, he ended up marrying the guy.
Well, there's a story that there were 2 families. Our ancestors was the mill owner and his family. And
A flour mill.
Yeah, one of the richest Jews in the village. And then there was another family on the wrong side of the tracks, Taylors or something like that. And there was a series of daughters and sons on each side, and they all had romantic liaisons.
Right.
And each one was broken up by the grandfather, and I guess in that case by the grandmother.
Freud. Samuel Freud.
And a curse came out, nobody knows what it is, that because they were broken up against God's will, that there would be a curse on each
of those
family member who didn't marry from that other family. And the first one married a goy, one had a bum leg, the wife, one had
what is the third one?
One was childless.
Would never had children.
Yeah, and that was Shifa, yeah. And then one had a miscarriage. The firstborn son would be miscarried. Mm-hmm. And that's your mother. Right?
That's right. My mother had a boy before me.
Yeah.
And what happened with that, I hear, that it was a very tough birth. She tended to very big babies. I was over 10 pounds as a baby. But this boy was 12, pushing 13. And they used forceps, which squeezed his brain. And he was killed. He was killed.
Yeah. And we don't know what the name of the other family is, but you had a boyfriend who went to World War II. Jerry.
Jerry
And what was
Spindell.
Jerry's last name? Spindell.
Spindell.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So it's possible that whatever the
Yeah.
ancestor name of Spindell was, that was the family.
That was the other family.
The other
Oh
family.
yes, and then they tried to, because of this, they felt that they could make up with it for all the tragedies by putting him together with me. And that was so there would be no more tragedies in the family. And so I went out with Jerry, we did go out, we became engaged, and he was taken into the service, the United States, so he was in the service. I still can picture one of the pictures he sent me.
Yeah, I think we still
I
have a
have
picture of Jerry. Yeah.
With his little cap.
Yeah. His army outfit on.
Yeah, army uniform, and not a cap with a brim, but the things you fold up and put in your pocket.
Yeah.
And so that was going to be the cure-all, and after that there would be no problems. In our family, the curse would be gone. And I never married Jerry. I fell in love with David in Brooklyn College. And I guess we'll have to get into David.
All right.
And I've sent him a Dear John letter. Remember the Dear John letters? Oh, did that hurt.
I thought that he never got it, and he showed
He
up at
didn't.
your
He
door
didn't got
after
it.
you were married.
He
And
came
was
to the
disappointed.
first thing he did when he got home after the service. He came and knocked on my door. He wanted to surprise me. I opened the door with a baby in my arms. He said, "Oh, I didn't know you were babysitting." Babysitting, this is my baby. And poor Jerry, I could see the color drain out of his face.
And he was a big, tough guy, too.
Yeah, through the war. He'd become a sergeant by then, I think. Yeah. And they're tough, oh boy.
Oh, yeah. All right. Let's
So that
mention
was the end of
Adele a
that
little
family.
bit and your depression experience, whatever you're willing to talk about. And you're going from apartment to apartment during the time that your
Yeah,
dad
when
was...
things were very tight, my father was hospitalized. My mother was left with a 2-year-old kid and begging people to take care of her. We used to rent one room in a floor. People used to rent rooms when they had their own apartments. And my mother would work out, I think I mentioned, 11, 12 hours a day. How I got brought up after between 2 and 11, I have no knowledge of. But my mother's dream was always to move to Coney Island. She was a wonderful swimmer, and Coney Island was her dream. And when I was, ultimately we lived on every odd street in Coney Island. She made it. I lived on 9th Street, 19th Street, 21st Street, 23rd Street, 25th Street, 27th, and 29th. And at 29th Street there was a gate. And after that there was Seagate, which were private homes. And very rich people lived in Seagate. And we could see the gate. And that was a great, great street to live on in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah. Okay, what was the other question?
You had a best friend.
And when I lived in Coney Island, I met a girl, very cute, beautiful face. She looked just like Lana Turner. She was gorgeous. People used to want her autograph when she was dressed up. Can you believe this? And she got so sick of this that she would just sign Lana Turner and get rid of people. This was the gorgeous. She would attract all the boys and I would end up getting them.
Now, how old were you?
Well, that was between 17 and a half and 19.
And how old were you when you made it to Coney Island?
You must have been
About
pretty
11,
young.
Yeah, about in my teens, early 13 maybe, something like that. We just spent all those years. And they had a deal in all the apartments in Coney Island. I don't know, they might have had them elsewhere, where there was because of the Depression, things were pretty bad. People didn't have much money. People were not renting apartments anymore. They couldn't pay the rent. So they were given first, as an inducement, by the landlords, they were given first and last month free in a year. What they didn't know is that people would move out after that last month, of course. And that's the way we lived on all those streets, 19, 21, 23. But my mother wanted me to go to the same school. So she would try to get an apartment in the same school district for me not to get, have a tough time. Although I was a very tough kid because I was on my own as a girl. I was never big, but I was tough. And of course, did we talk about the knee thing? We didn't talk about the knee thing?
I don't even know if I know about the knee
The
thing.
knee thing with the pillow. My mother trained me every night because she worked all day and I was alone. And in the basement of all these buildings with the apartments, the 3-story buildings with apartments on each floor, the super who took care of the cleaned up, etc., lived in a little cubby hole down in the basement. And in the basement, each of the apartment owners or renters had a little area where they could store stuff. And in the wintertime when it was freezing, they used to put lines up for us to hang our clothing on. No use using the line out the window when the clothing would freeze and then we'd come in and get wet. So I used to go down and I used to do the wash. And I did all the housework, of course, my mother worked. So I used to go down the basement to hang the clothes, and she was worried about the supers because she had heard tales about them. They were like the immigrants then, the illegals, who did all the crap work for everybody, never married, and these were men living by themselves. My mother was terrified that something would happen. So every night she said, all right, time for bed, let's do the exercise. She would pick up a pillow and hold it in front of herself. And she'd go. I would back up, flat up against the nearest wall, so that I would have leverage. Not just, 80 pounds? But I would have the leverage of myself backed up against the wall. And she would come at me slowly with the pillow and smile. This funny smile that wasn't a smile, she was acting. And with her German accent, Viennese accent, she would try to speak like a Puerto Rican. And it came out very strangely. She would say, hello, little girl. I had nice candy for you. Come, you want the lollipop, little girl? Is orange lollipop? Is chocolate lollipop? You want this lollipop? And I was taught to say, oh, okay. Back up against the wall. And get ready. And as soon as he came close enough, up goes the knee. Right to the bottom part of the pillow where she held it. And my mother guaranteed that they would lay on the floor and I could run out. And I had to do it twice. Twice I had to do that. But every night that was our exercise. You'd think you'd do sit-ups, push-ups, leg-ups, arm rotations. No, we had to do the pillow exercise.
Did they lay on the floor while you ran away?
I never knew.
You ran away
They
too
started
quick.
to go down and I
Yeah.
was gone.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was gone. I never really knew. So
I'm sure they
but
did.
then I used to go upstairs because I was terrified. I used to lock myself in the door in our room. And when my mother came home, I would tell her, I had to give her a report of everything that happened during the day. About the boys hanging around the corner in the candy store, where if I see them, I would run the other way, or go across the street and go around them. All of that, I had to give her a running tale of everything that I saw that day. I had one little girlfriend, Adele,
Yeah.
whose father owned or operated, I never did really, I think he owned it, or operated one of the rides in Coney Island. It's the one that went round and round, and you sit in it, and like a teacup thing. You sit in a teacup, and it goes round and round and round, and everybody screams. And they used to use myself and my girlfriend Adele, the one who looked like Lana Turner, gorgeous girl. And we used to scream and act as though we're having such fun, so that we could attract passerbys in Coney Island to pay their 5 cents for a ride. And I think that's why I became an actress.
Yeah. Did you do that on the?
Steeplechase.
Yeah.
Also, I worked at Steeplechase. I got a job taking tickets, and then I worked there too. And when people were there, I would take tickets. But when it got a little slow, I would run inside, cross the tracks before another cart came through, and come out laughing and having such fun. Oh, it was fun. It was such fun. And they even let me out alone. It was great. Oh, you got to try this. And I used to be a shill.
Yeah.
For that and for the steeplechase. Oh, I get
Did
sick
you do
of steeplechase. The loop-de-loops.
Oh, the loop-de-loop.
Oh, I used to get so sick because I used to get car sick, air sick, everything sick. I still do get car sick occasionally if I sit in the back seat, but I had to do it. I'd go in the back and throw up and come back.
Okay. Tell the story about, actually, you grew and then stopped growing, right?
Yeah.
So you were a little big.
I was a huge little girl.
Yeah.
I was 5 feet 2.5. My mother was only 4'11".
When you
Everybody
were how
was
old?
small. And I was 5'2.5". And I stopped growing. I'm still 5 feet 2.5. No, I think I'm smaller.
Yeah.
I think I've shrunk. I'm 81. So
But you're talking fourth grade or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Can you imagine? So that I was a tough bully. You know, people didn't fool around with me. The girls used to come to me for protection. We'll tell. What? Wait a minute. You know who's my friend? You better not do that.
Tell her about the club and tell her about the Monopoly game.
The Monopoly I don't remember, but the club.
But then you made your own Monopoly game.
Oh yes, couldn't afford to buy a Monopoly game. Come on.
Yeah.
No, at that time people used to have clubs. Because the kids were mostly on the streets alone, there was a way, I think, of safety, frankly. So you always went in groups of girls, for instance. When I came going home from school, we used to go in groups. Oh, I used to be the storyteller. I would make up running soap operas with characters, and I'd have 5 and 6 and 7 girls getting as close to me as they could, or they'd miss some of today's episode. And then they'd drop me off at home and go to their houses. That's probably maybe why I'm a writer now.
Yeah.
Or an actor, or both.
Do you remember the name of the club?
El Titon. Now, we couldn't agree on a name, my club. And we had names like, there were so many clubs, it was hard to get a name. We decided on calling it No Name, Emanon. We found out there was already an Emanon. So we went round and finally we said, well, okay, then we'll call it No Title, El Titon. Mistake. You know what the boys kept saying? There go the tits. El Titon. Oh, the tits are coming. But we kept the name because we were too proud to get rid of it.
Okay. Shall we take a break?
Okay.
And then, why bother? I mean, I think it's
Okay,
great
you're
to have
recording.
you as part of it.
You're recording.
All right, we're going to talk about Irving.
Yeah, let's talk about Irving and coming back from the hospital.
Well, when I was 2 years old, Irving was hospitalized because he had had a car accident and had a shard of glass lodged in his brain and it impeded his memory. He couldn't remember anything once he went to sleep at night. It was a new world the next day. Now, that happened when I was 11 years old. And we used to go to visit him once a month. My mother said we were visiting an uncle. And we'd see him once a month, and he never remembered me from one time. I used to complain on the subway, why do I have to go? He never knows who I am. What's the difference? If he doesn't know, why do we have to go? It became a poem. If he doesn't know, why do I have to go? And my mother would say, if he doesn't know, you have to go anyway. She was a really amazing lady, very loyal. And so we went. But then a doctor from England used my father, with my mother's permission, to proceed with his operation and demonstrate it for doctors in the United States. And it worked. And suddenly, his next visit, there was his 2-year-old, now 11 years old. And there was Rose, now heavier, or tired lady. No longer this gorgeous creature, Rose, that he knew. It was quite a shock for that poor man. Quite a shock. At any rate, then they said he would be in the hospital for another month or two and have some rehabilitation. I mean, cars were different. The world was different. And and my mother found an apartment. That's where we met the Crimmys, because we had the apartment on the same floor as the Criminy family. And so my grandmother my aunt and Shifa and Max had to go find an apartment of their own. My grandmother kept the one bedroom, and my mother and father, Irving and Rose, now were going to be husband and wife, had the other bedroom, the big bedroom.
And what about Jack? Was he still
Jack
there?
was there, and he slept on the couch. And I slept on a four-legged triangular cot in the hall that we put up every night. And that's the way the family lived for a number of years, and until Jack was hospitalized too, himself. Oh, yeah.
So they had already arrived when your dad recovered.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
that's right.
So
That's right.
they had arrived even before your dad recovered. So he came into this household just full of people.
Right. He came into the household full of people, and everybody juggled around who was going to sleep where and what are we going to do. So my aunt and uncle Sophie and Max had to find an apartment. We lived on 6th Street, and we found an apartment for them on 4th Street, so that way they were close by, so that they could be there all the time. And the family then was, quote, together. I suddenly had an aunt, an uncle, another uncle, I had a grandmother. I mean, it was unbelievable, from nobody, just my mother and myself. I had a whole family. It was marvelous. It was absolutely marvelous.
Was it also a little stressful?
Oh, I don't know, they kept it away from me.
Oh, did they? Okay.
So I really didn't know what happened when I went to bed. And sometimes I would have to go to bed earlier, so I'd go to bed in Bubby, my grandmother's bed, and then the family would then wait. My mother would wake me, okay, it's time for you to go in the hall. And I would set up my cot and I'd sleepily get dragged into the hall and flop down and continue sleeping. It never bothered me, I was able to go to sleep.
Now, I just want to ask one thing about your grandmother Giddle having the dreams, and your mother had a occasional
My mother,
spiritual
my
moment,
grandmother,
I guess,
yeah,
you know.
my mother used to be very excitable. She had high blood pressure for one thing. She was very, very burdened. She was working very hard. She had a tough life. And she was on a short string. I'll put that to put it nicely. If I didn't do, don't talk back to me, just go and do it. Go do it. Well, one time I fell asleep on the couch. And, oh no, my father fell asleep on the couch, listening to the radio. And we were in the kitchen. It was after dinner. I was doing the dishes, and women were bustling around. It came bedtime, and my mother said, Irving, you got to get up, wake up and go to bed. Wake up and go to sleep. And he said, what are you saying? Wake up and go to sleep. I'm sleeping. Leave me alone, Rose. Irving, you have to go to sleep in the bedroom. I'm not moving, Irving. I'm not moving, Irving says. I'm not moving. I remember standing there and watching them with my pillows, because he had to take his own pillow. And I had to have my pillow and get everything set up. And he was going to be stubborn that night. She said, you want to lay on the couch, Irving? I'll let you lay on the couch. Your daughter needs the couch because she was big shot, was shaved her arms, and now her arms are infected, and I have to put compresses on her. And the kitchen is right there, and if I carry her to the bedroom, the compresses are going to be cold. So you go to the bedroom. I'm not moving, Rose. Okay, you want to lay there? I will bring you compresses. When she got angry and said something like that, it always came true. And he said, Rose, what did you say? I'm going, Rose. She said, too late. You can lay there with the compresses. Well, don't you think that 2 days later he started scratching? And pretty soon it got red. And pretty soon they had to shave the hair away from his underarm. And pretty soon he was good and infected. And he had boils under each arm and lay on that couch. Because she didn't want to infect the beds. Her bed. He'd lay on the couch with the compresses. And after that, when she got excited, he'd say, I'm doing it, Rose. Don't get excited. Don't say it. Don't say it. I'm doing it. What? What do you want me to do? She said, because you're nagging me so, I forgot. Don't forget. Please, Rose, don't forget. If you forget, something will happen. She was absolutely the boss of the house.
The family legend is that first daughter to first daughter to first daughter
Was going to be psychic in
Yeah.
some way or another.
in some way or another. And of course, that family line doesn't have an A. So nobody knows, where it comes from or what the legend, what started the legend. But apparently Gittel could read dreams and had everybody terrified that she was going to dream there.
My mother would speak in haste and it would come true.
Yeah.
She would
And are you psychic?
I have been taught to be very careful.
I think you are.
I am.
Who was the actor that got arrogant?
I have to be very careful because it hurts me when nasty things happen to people that I get upset about. I had that same thing my mother had.
Really?
And as a result, I'm the most even-tempered person in the world. Everything just washes off my back. You can't insult me into getting angry. I'm just not going to stand here and listen. I'm gone. Actually, it's not a very stressful way to live. But a couple of instances happened with a couple of people and frightened me, and I didn't want to be the harbinger of bad vibes. And so I learned to be very, very easygoing.
What was the story about the actor who thought he was a great magician?
I don't remember that.
Somebody was bragging, and I think I know the name, but I won't say it. And
Well, if you whisper it in my ear, maybe I'll remember.
Steve Franken.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember him. I liked him. But what happened?
Well, anyway, he was arrogant,
Oh,
and,
yes.
and something happened.
This
in the
was
show.
quite a well-established young man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
actor.
he, you said something about fire. He smoked or something.
Oh, this was, yeah, this was awful. Because of my son, my Uncle Jack, whose lungs were bad from the camps, I was very, very much against smoking or being around smoke. I never did smoke. I think because of the kids, I tried it, but I wouldn't do it. And so I was working with him on shows. He was doing one role, I was doing another on a regular basis. We were on a series together, I think. I don't remember the series. And he got me irritated one time. And I did the thing. I said, okay, you want to build a fire with that cigarette? You'll have your fire. And it'll be the last fire for you if you're not careful.
Okay, flash forward to a party a week or two later, and what happened then? The magic trick.
Yeah, you tell them.
He decided to do a magic trick,
That's right.
and he thought that somebody told him if you put Vaseline on your hand and set it afire, that it won't hurt, and that you can put it out.
He was a bit of a show-off.
And he set himself on fire. And this was a week after she said, if you keep smoking around me.
You smoke when any time I'm around here and you will be burnt by the fire.
Yeah. So, now those are called, there's good and bad, and those are called get and shoe.
A golden moment.
And tell the
You
story
said
about
it
what
in
is a golden moment.
Each person has a given number, very few, of golden moments in their lives. You have yours. You might have used them up. I don't know. Each person has a golden moment where what they say will come true. So my grandmother taught this to me, so you be very careful and be very nice. Because if you say something in anger and it's nasty and it comes true, you'll never forgive yourself. You'll have to live with that remembering what you did. I wrote a play called The Golden Moment.
Yeah. And the female line has them all the time,
Right.
basically.
We get more than one, the female line.
Yeah.
Men, not so rare and often, but occasionally they have their golden moments.
Okay, now tell the story about how Dad used up his golden moment.
I don't remember.
All right. This is the 60s, and we were living in Whitsett Street on...
Whitsett Avenue.
Yeah, Whitsett Avenue in North Hollywood, California. We're talking 1965 or 66. And the subject of the golden moment came up over the dinner table. And there was a white table, I still remember it, and these kind of super modern 50s type chairs. And Dad said, you know, a golden moment, and we were all drinking the yellow Hawaiian punch. I don't know if you remember that. And he said, you know, this looks like pee. And I'll bet you there's pee in my glass. And he looked down.
My glass has a whole bunch of pee in it.
Yeah.
Who needs a pee?
Right.
Who needs pee in a glass?
He looked down, and in that glass, it was a plastic cup, I still remember,
Clear
was
plastic.
a pea of the vegetable,
Green pea.
a green pea.
It's got
We were
no
not
nice-
eating green peas. There's actually no reason why there should be a pea in the glass. And we all looked up and we said, "This is your
golden
this is
moment.
your golden moment."
You used it up.
Yeah.
You better eat that pea.
Yeah,
It's that old, be careful what you wish for.
yeah.
That's right.
So he used up his golden moment on a pea in the glass.
And he believed it.
After that, he believed in the golden moment. Yeah.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So anyway, you know, this whole female thing, that's a Galicianer thing. You know, the Litvak Jews are rationalist and the Galicianers are not. And even though we are Viennese, you'd think that strain was washed out, but apparently not. And they all spoke German when they came back. And my aunt and uncle still spoke German in the household. Just beautiful Viennese, accented,
High German.
high Hochdeutsch, even, you know, in the 60s and 70s when I knew them, which was interesting. Not Yiddish, but German. They spoke Yiddish too, but they spoke German to each other. So that's kind of interesting. And she would, Aunt Schiffa did books.
Bookkeeper.
Bookkeeper.
Oh.
She would do all of her books in German.
Really?
Yeah. I still remember seeing her very, very intricate
Beautiful handwriting.
handwriting, yeah.
It looked like, well, she could have been a scribe generations before that. She would have gotten money just for that script. It was just beautiful with trills, you know, frills and curls and, oh.
Yeah. So anyway, let's go on. It's 1945. You're going to Brooklyn College. You're going there with Adele, your friend.
My lifelong friend.
And let's talk about how you met a man there.
Anything I did, Adele would do. When I had a club, she was the secretary in the club. Whatever it was, she would do. And it was this business was somehow a leader and a follower. And when I decided that I had to have a college education, I was working in a factory in the office. It was called Ross and Oberlieder. It was the name of Mr. Ross and Mr. Oberlieder. I was working as the secretary and I used to answer the phones. What is that, when they had the things that you plug?
Receptionist. Yeah.
What did they call that?
Telephone
PBX.
operator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
telephone operator. I still remember what the motion is. So, and then I used to take dictation, and somebody would man the phones, and then I'd come back and type and answer the phones. That was my job. At Ross and Oberlieder, when I answered the phone, Ross and Oberlieder, I used to say, my mother used to claim I'd do it at night. I'd wake up, sit up, and go, Ross and Oberlieder, Ross and Oberlieder. The Charlie Chaplin syndrome. Remember that movie? And so, I got off the point.
The point is that you decided to take some classes at,
Yes. So
I
I
believe it was
decided,
Brooklyn College,
I just
wasn't it?
don't want to do this job forever. I've got to get an education. I had a high school education. I had the whole thing with the prom, and my mother made the dress. Well, I still remember that bow that she made from the top of my head. I have a picture of it. Hysterically funny. And she kept that white dress. Anyway, we were... she's a funny lady.
Yeah, tell the
My
story.
mother.
Yeah.
You tell.
Which
I can't tell
story is
about
it?
her.
Well, I know there's a story where Dad was in a class and the teacher.
Oh, I see. Well, I'll tell how I met her.
All right.
Well, wherever I went, Adele went, and wherever she went, the boys flocked. She was so beautiful. I decided to take German so that I could then speak well, I was doing a broken German to speak to my grandmother and Jack. And so I decided I've got to speak this thing. I didn't have the words I wanted to use. So I took German and I took philosophy. And so Adele took German and philosophy, of course. And we went to class together. And in our first philosophy class, Adele marched into, there was a gorgeous young man standing at the door, at the side of the jamb of the door, leaning and watching everybody. And Adele went, and I went by, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and Adele went by. As soon as she started by, he started following. She sat down on the far side, left side of the room, in a chair. He sat down in the next seat to her right. And I sat down in the front, in front of, Adele sat behind me. And that's the first glimpse I had of David Silverstein. Later shortened when I became an actor to Silvern.
No, there's another story about why it was really shortened.
Well,
Yeah.
at any rate, he was David Silverstein. And he lived in Brighton Beach. Cha-cha-cha, yes. And then Sheepshead Bay, across the bay, Manhattan Beach, which was across the bay from Sheepshead Bay, and marvelous, all private homes, and only 2 family homes stuck together. They did well. His dad was an accountant, worked for a lot of factories and a lot of private accounts, and made a good living for the time.
Yeah, he worked for the gas company.
And he worked for the gas company and was allowed to have his own clientele as well, as long as he put in his hours at the gas company, the Brooklyn Gas Company. Yeah. So at any rate, that's how I met David Silvern. And there was this gorgeous creature. He sat down next to Adele. Now at Brooklyn College, they had what they called the dancing lounge. If you didn't have any classes, or after class for about 2 hours or so, there was a record player, and somebody always manned that record player, and the students used to come and dance. And so Adele invited him to the lounge. He made a play for Adele, and she said, yeah, I'd like to go to the lounge. You want to come with me? Come later? And he said, sure. So later on we went to the lounge, and we were all dancing, etc., etc. And she went out on a date with him. And the following Monday, back in class, she was sitting in my chair, in my seat. I said, you're in the wrong seat, Adele. She said, no, I'm out with David. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. You talk to him. I'm sitting here. Take him. I can't make it. He wants to talk philosophy. I don't even know why I'm in this class, because you're here. And since he came into the class, we stopped learning anything because he had one discussion, an argument with the philosophy teacher. So we haven't even learned what they're talking about. And he's talking to me. I can't see him anymore. So today you go to the lounge. I'm not going. Oh, come on, you can't do that. He's a sweet boy. I'm not going to the lounge. So I went to the lounge, and he went to the lounge. And that was the first time we ever were together. And I still remember, there is such a thing as physical attraction. And I know it because it happened. As soon as we danced and put his arms around me, I shivered. I literally shivered. And I was thrown. I couldn't think. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't speak well. I felt like an idiot. And I guess I was in love. It's what the Italians call the thunderbolt, where you plant your eyes on the one, boom, lightning strikes and you've had it. That's it. And that's how I met my husband, David, his grandpa.
Tell the story about Grandpa Saul and how he checked to see if you were worthy.
Oh, Grandpa Saul. We were invited to, my mother and myself and my father, when David and I were going together, around together, dating. David's mother wanted to know, who's this girl that you keep on? See, you're not home, you're not this. You bring them here for supper. And we made the time, the date, and we're going to meet the Silversteins, and the man is a professional, he's an accountant. He doesn't work in a factory upholstering, even though it's his own factory. But an educated family, even she has a degree from Europe. She went to school in Europe, the wife, Mrs. Silverstein. Never called her by anything but Mrs. Silverstein and Mr. Silverstein. You don't call him Saul and Beatrice. But Mr. and Mrs. So we made the appointment. We came there. I was shaking. My mother had a bottle of wine, of Manischewitz that we brought, and my father had flowers in his hand. And we went to dinner. And at dinner, there was Aunt Hilda, well now
Oh, God.
Ida,
Oh, God.
Hilda, his sisters, the Silverstein clan.
Oh, boy.
Ida and Hilda. Now, Ida and Hilda are another story themselves. Blood sisters. One was 5'9", the other was 2'1". A very tiny little lady. And the little one was the boss, of course.
That was Ida.
That was Ida. Ida was the boss. Hilda, go get a cup. Go get some more tea. Hilda, go see if somebody's in the bathroom. I want to go there and come back. They were a scream, those two ladies.
And they with thick New York accents. And they were still doing that in the 1960s when we came back there at Sunday dinner. They hadn't changed a bit.
Unbelievable. They lived together.
They still live together.
Neither of them married. They were both unmarried ladies.
Well, Ida actually married a few husbands.
Oh, as a matter of fact, Ida would marry. Yeah, you're right. She had 3 husbands. Ida would marry, and 6 months later she was not married.
Right.
I never knew why. I never found out why. And then all of a sudden she was married again, like let's say 8 months later. She was a beautiful little thing, and lively, and bossy, and a macher. And then all of a sudden she's married, and then that guy disappeared. For all I know, she could have killed him off. Gone. The 3rd husband died. We know what happened to him. He had a heart attack and died.
Yeah, she just drove him nuts.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, so Grandpa Saul's looking at you, and he comes up.
We came for dinner. He was going to meet this one that his David was, quote, running around with. My first date was a bicycle ride along the shore in Manhattan Beach. David didn't have any money. He was in school. He wasn't working. Oh, he was working. That was a little later.
Yeah.
And so his sister had a bike, and he had a bike in their garage. Can you imagine they had a garage and a house, a duplex? Oh, my mother was excited. Oh, boy. And so the first date was bike riding, because he didn't want to spend any money. So I had to go on the subway and go to Manhattan Beach. He met me on the subway. We walked across the bridge from Sheepshead Bay to Manhattan Beach. Came there, we got on the bikes and rode along the shore. It was very nice. Actually, my legs were killing me. I wasn't used to bike riding. But he kind of held it and showed me how to ride. And I was very quick. I caught on just like, I enjoyed bike riding after that. But his sister's bike is the bike I used. So at any rate, that was our first love affair with the bikes and the bike riding. And so when we came, he said, you invite those people over here, I want to see who this is you're hanging around with. And okay, she's in Brooklyn College. I then signed up for her. You met her in philosophy? That's good. She knows the value of education. Bring them here. My mother got all verpitzt. Whoa, she had the lace dress. I don't remember what I wore. And my father had the tie and the jacket and the suit and looked gorgeous. He was a beautiful man. And we came in, and as we came through the door, Saul opened the door. Beatrice was her name, was in the kitchen cooking. He stood in the doorway, behind him, Hilda and Ida, peeking around. And my father walked in first. Women don't go before men. My father walked in first, and he said, not a bad-looking man. I read this. Not a bad-looking man. My mother, he's saying to Hilda and Ida, not a bad-looking man, but of course everybody could hear him. And then my mother walked by, and he said, oh, heavy lady, whoa, that's trouble, that's trouble. And then I came through and he said, well, maybe she'll take after the father. And that was the first few words I heard of my future father-in-law.
What did he check?
Oh yeah, he said, and then he stopped me and he said, where are your glasses? And I thought, oh my God, we were supposed to bring glasses for the table. So I said, nobody told me to bring the glasses. He said, oh, are they in your purse? And I said, what? He said, eyeglasses, eyeglasses. I said, I don't wear glasses. Oh, good. Because David was very nearsighted. He was very nearsighted. He was checking out the physical qualities.
Oh my.
And you, yeah. He's the same eye prescription as my husband.
And then he had you open your mouth.
And then he said, do you have something over there in your mouth? And I said, what's the matter? He said, open your mouth. So what am I going to do, not do it? So I opened up my mouth and he said, oh, only 2 fillings. Oh, that's pretty good.
He checked her teeth like he was buying a horse.
They were buying a horse. And then he approved. And to Hilda, very good, very good. 2 fillings, 2 fillings. And Ida says, I have 7. They went through a thing about fillings.
Yeah.
But I was a prize. I wasn't fat like my mother.
You want to take a break?
I'm not doing. Okay.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Okay.
So you're at dinner with your future in-laws. So, and they've sort of checked you out and
Right.
and cursorily approved. How long before you married?
At that point, we started dating and going to the lounge, which didn't cost any money, and bike riding for about a month and a half or so. And I kept on writing to Jerry. He was in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I was concerned, I was really engaged to him. This was my mother's best friend's son.
Oh.
And they were the 2 European women. They knew each other overseas, and they were thrilled that this could make a match and kill the family curse too, at the same time. So that was all going on and busy writing, and I fell in love with David. It was a thunderbolt, and I did send a letter to Jerry, to his I think they called it APO or something
Yeah,
like
it was
that.
in Europe and they
I
still
hadn't
have
thought
APO.
of it. And I sent the letter away and told him that I had met somebody and that I was sure because he was so talented and good looking that he'd find somebody else. Oh, I felt terrible. This was common, but it was a terrible feeling to have to do it. This was the Dear John letter. It even had a name at that time. That receiving a Dear John letter was a mark of total loss. And I had to send one, which I did. At any rate, then I found out that Jerry was coming home. I was busy dating David. But Jerry was coming home. Well, that threw Dave into a panic. This was like 8 or 9 months later, something like that. And we were constantly together. And he was terrified that Jerry was coming home. The family wanted the match. He knew all about Jerry. Seen the pictures on the end tables, in the uniform. 6 foot 2.5, gorgeous hunk of guy. He was only 5'11 and a half, but gorgeous. He was prettier than I am. I ever was. And he said, we're going to get married. We're going to talk to the parents. We're going to get married. I'll talk to my mother and father. And he spoke to them and they went crazy. They said, no, you're not doing anything until you have your degree. You get your degree, then you do whatever you want. If you get married now, you'll never get an education. That's that. No way. I never even got to talk to my mother because he came, when we met the next time, he was desperate. And we planned to run away. We planned to elope. Well, we had a problem. Not like today. Today people are having premarital sex. My mother always drummed it into my head that if you let a boy touch you below the belly button, you won't be a virgin anymore, and he'll get killed by a car, and no other man will ever touch you. You keep his hands where they belong. You're not going to be alone with him anymore. He can't come here unless we're home. And I knew that was the way it was going to be. And David said, let's elope. Which we did. Which we did. He dressed up with first time I'd ever seen him in a suit and tie. Where did he get that suit? Do you know? I think he borrowed it from, what was his best friend that lived in Coney Island? I'll think of it later.
Glatter, wasn't it?
David Glatter.
David Glatter.
His best friend. He got a suit from David Glatter, tie, the whole thing. I didn't recognize him. He looked so gorgeous. And we met. We took a train. We went up to Greenwich, Connecticut. We went up to in Greenwich, Connecticut was like another world. All these little houses with signs, weddings. Do you need witnesses? I mean, it was incredible. Everybody was in couples, holding hands all over the place, and so were we. And we went into one of those places. They found a couple to stand up for us. We got married. And we went back on the train, back to New York. And we never had an opportunity to be alone, to have a honeymoon for a long, long time. However, when everybody was and he was in college and didn't have classes, he was over at the house. And I got pregnant.
Now, did the parents not know that you married?
Well, we kept it as long, no, we kept it secret because David's mother was absolutely furious at even the thought of it. And I was terrified of my mother. I thought she was going to give me a curse.
Oh, so your mother didn't know either?
No.
Oh, I thought she
knew
did.
at that point.
Okay.
But when I got pregnant, that's when I told my mother. And she said, I expected, the wrath of her wrath, and she just sat there for a minute. She said, well, it's done. I'll talk to him. So when he came over to go on a date, or wherever, she said, I want to talk to you. Out to me, out. I had to get out of the house. I got out, I was in the hall trying to hear through that door that was 12 inches thick. Couldn't hear a thing. Subsequently, I found out that she said to him, look, I know what happens, you're attracted to one another. I know, I'm not going to holler. Hollering doesn't do any good. I'm not going to curse, I'm not going to holler. If you want out of this thing, I will take care of my daughter and the baby. He said, ma'am, I don't want to do that. Mrs., he called her, Mrs., I don't want to do that. He said, I love her, and we're married. And now we'll have to figure out how to live. I'll have to quit school and probably get a job. And she said, no, you won't. You're going to move in here. Which is what we did. We had a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor in Brooklyn. And my grandmother went to live with Sophie and Max, and we were given that bedroom. She was an amazing lady. Amazing lady. And there was the baby that grew up. There's Stevie.
My brother Steve.
Now, what did his parents say?
Oh my God!
They
I told you.
Talked to you
I
for
told
years.
No, we didn't.
Really?
Yeah, didn't we tell you? Didn't we tell you you're going to have your education? My mother paid for the rest of his education. They cut him off. They cut him. You're married. You didn't listen to us. You're now a man with a wife with a baby to come. Get out and take care of your baby.
Now, was that mostly Grandma B, or was that Grandma Saul?
I don't know, honey.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't privy to that.
Okay.
But she was a very strong woman who, you do right, you get right. You do wrong, suffer. And so I suspect that she ran Saul ragged, But she was, I might be wrong to this day, who knows? I was never there in the privacy behind their closed doors. But that's what it looked like to me.
So Stephen was born.
Stephen was born.
When?
1945.
No, January 2nd, 1946.
Oh, that's right, we were married in
Yeah,
1945.
and you were married a month and a half before VE Day.
Right. And Steve was born. Big kid. I had big babies. And, yeah, now I remember that.
Yeah.
Do you remember VE Day and what you did?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm. I guess
Probably we're a little busy to go
at that
party.
time,
Yeah, right.
at that time the world was so different for me that I only concentrated on what was in that room. With a baby. I didn't know anything about taking care of a baby or myself. And a husband. And he did finish, my mother, well, he came and told me what happened. He said, my mother said, you're married now, you're a man, go take care of your wife and child, goodbye. And he came back and he told my mother and myself what happened. And she said, all right, you'll have to move in here, but you're going to finish your education. She paid for the next 2 years. She said, but you get a job, a part-time job, which he did. He got himself a job in a factory. I think Criminy got him a job.
Probably.
And he ran the elevator. Up and down. Not the indoor elevator, the sort of the trucking elevator area. And it was a very strange area because I used to come and meet him and bring him lunches when I could get away. And I used to meet him, and one time, the first time I came to meet him, I waved to David, 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 and he picked up his arm, and then he picked up the other arm, and he grabbed a rope, and his feet came off the phone, and he pulled the rope, and the elevator went up with him. The freight elevator, and he disappeared. And that was the only glimpse I ever had of him in his job. I still remember when the feet disappeared. God, that's funny.
Okay, he graduated from what, Brooklyn Polytechnic, or was it Brooklyn College?
No, not Brooklyn College. He always wanted to be an engineer. He had a numbers mind. I guess he got that from his dad. And he was it Brooklyn? What's Cooper Union?
Cooper Union.
That's what
Okay, so he
did.
did. That's when he went to
Cooper
Cooper Union. Okay, all right. When he,
that was an engineering school, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was one of the best in the country.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you really had to pass the test.
And
he was in the 99 percentile.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant man to this day.
Yeah, and that was a invitation.
I'm the beauty and he's the brains.
Yeah. Okay, now there is a story about Dad trying to get his first engineering job and putting out applications as David Silverstein.
Right.
What happened?
Well, this was a field that was dominated by
Anglos, I guess.
Anglos.
Nice way to put it.
Yeah, I was going to say by Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah.
And he was top of his class. He had recommendations from professors as far as his skill was concerned. He could see a problem in his mind. He could see the machinery in his mind. He became an inventor after that, by the way.
And he could turn it. He
Yeah,
could see
he could.
it and he could turn it.
He could visualize mechanical things. He got into the right field, and that's a stroke of luck for any human being. And at any rate, he got a job. After he got that job, he had the job in the elevator. He got his degree. I'll never forget how proud we were at the graduation. When he got up and got that rolled up thing with that funny little